I'm Jasmine Adams, and in this series of Footprints to Fruition, we will dive into how budding entrepreneurs find the funding. Now, starting a business is hard. There are a lot of challenges, but finding startup capital is usually one of the hardest. I will introduce you to dynamic entrepreneurs and show you how they sourced and obtained the funding to launch their dreams. I'm sitting here with one of my really good friends, Tiffany McKenzie, and you will probably remember her from the Footprints to Fruition episode of Vibe Ride. Well, guess what? Tiffany is a serial entrepreneur. She is in the wellness, health, and fitness space and is ready to bring you another business. And we are going to talk to her about how she is finding the funding with her entrepreneurial endeavors. Thank you, Tiffany, for being here.
Thank you, Jasmine, for having me.
Yes, of course. I know. Let's jump into this. Yes. So, one of the things that really strikes me when I look at videos around entrepreneurship and building businesses is people say, I started a business and this is how I'm progressing. Revenue has been great, but what they don't get into is the seed funding. Like, where did you get your initial capital from? How did you sustain yourself from having the idea to opening your doors? So the first thing that I just want to do, at least for everyone out there to know, is tell us a little bit about your businesses, and then we'll jump into the funding piece.
Sure. So one of the first businesses I started was Vibe Ride, which is an indoor cycling studio. Okay. We are now franchising Vibe Ride, which is great. Our first franchise location is in Grant Park. Our second franchise will be in Detroit, Michigan. When we started Vibe Ride, we kind of tried everything. We threw everything at the wall and we kind of saw what stuck. So that meant, putting in our own money. So obviously our own sweat equity, our own actual cash, asking family and friends for money. We also got a small business loan, and on top of that, we did a crowdsourcing campaign. So we really tried a bunch of different ways to get funding for Vibe Ride. Some of them worked well, some not so much.
Okay, and so let's take the first one that you mentioned. Yeah. So you talked about personal investing. How did you figure out among you and your co-owners how much you needed to put in out of pocket? How did you all come to that agreement?
Well, first we started with a business plan. We actually hired a consultant that was known for doing indoor cycling studios. So we hired him, and he was able to put together a business plan for us, tell us how much everything was going to cost. Construction, the actual equipment, the bikes, labor, everything under one roof. And what all of it together would cost, we put it in a nice, pretty business plan. It's fancy. We could send it off to potential investors and also lenders. And that's kind of where we started with the overall number of what we thought it was going to cost to get this business started.
Okay. And so once you had that number, then it's interesting because your personal investments are at stake as well.
Correct.
Right? So how did you vet the fact that each one of you individually with your personal finances were even qualified to be personal funders for the organization?
It's a tough conversation to have. So, and I said this before in our last interview, you really need to pick your business partners carefully because this is your baby. It's almost like you're married to each other. So you need to have those premarital conversations. So how much money are you putting in? What is your credit? If this all goes to hell in a handbag, what are you able to put forward going forward? So it's tough conversations that you need to have with your business partners, and if they're not able to answer those questions, maybe you need to think about who you're going into business with.
Interesting. Okay. And so after you figured out how much each of you all would put into the business, then you moved to family and friends. Okay. And with that, then you're asking people for money.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I hear women talking about fear of asking people for even a small amount. So when I'm thinking about funding a business, these are large chunks of money. How did you muster up the courage? Did you have to have the courage? What was that process like for you all?
Well, absolutely. It could be scary and nerve-wracking asking people for money. But I think when it comes to being an entrepreneur, if you do not have the confidence to ask your family for money, how do you have the confidence to ask strangers to be your customers and to pay for your service or your product? Because it shouldn't be difficult to ask someone for money. If you're really passionate about something, they should be like, yes, absolutely, I'm into this. When do we start? What do I buy? You know what I mean? So I think it's really just making sure that you have the confidence and the gusto to be an entrepreneur, because that's what it takes.
And So how did that go? Did your family and friends rally around you and give you a lot of money, a little bit? Did you have to ask multiple times?
Family was easy. You know, that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. They support you. You know, you're their daughter or granddaughter, and they want to see you succeed. So that was easier than friends, I would say. Friends, you know, can sometimes put a little bit of judgment on what you're doing, and they may ask different questions, but that's important. You need those types of people in your life. You need people who are going to say, well, have you thought about that? And have you thought about this? And how's it going to work if this happens? And you know, what if some type of disruptor comes up? What are you going to do then? So, but again, that's something that's important to have in your life, because those are what your clients are going to do. That's what you need to be prepared for with customers. So I'd say family was a bit easier than friends, but there were definitely friends that have supported us along the way that have been our biggest supporters. So I'm thankful for them as well.
Okay. And then from the family and friends standpoint, then you all moved to, and I know you did the SBA loan, we'll get to that in a second, but you moved to crowdsourcing.
Yes.
So talk to us about what that experience was like.
So that was one of the things that didn't work so well. Okay. So we did an Indiegogo campaign, and it's one of those campaigns where you kind of come up with a goal target, and you say, I want $10,000, and I'm going to give this product or service, or this product and service, to certain levels of people who donate certain levels of money. And we had a lot of people when we started ViBride that were so excited for us. They were like, yes, we can't wait to go. We're going to do whatever. Let us just know what you need. We'll be there to support. And then here we are. We're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Now it's time for you to support. And then it was crickets. You know, so obviously really close family and friends would donate $50 or $100. We had a goal of $10,000 and we got nowhere near it. Nowhere near it, yeah.
Really?
And some of the crowdsourcing campaigns will just refund everybody their money if you don't actually hit that target. So thankfully Indiegogo was not one of those. So we were able to keep the money that we raised, but it was nowhere near our $10,000 goal.
That's a really hard pill to swallow.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yeah, and it kind of makes you feel like, well, do people really support us?
Right.
You know, because they're not willing to put their money where their mouth is.
So how did you all recover from that?
We kind of just kept going. You know, it was the crowdsourcing was one of those things that was just going to be an icing on the cake. We had set up exactly how much we needed. We had put forth our actual own personal investments, and our family and friends had invested, and we had also done an SBA loan. So the crowdsourcing was just going to be extra funding that would be helpful, but if we didn't have it, it was okay.
Got it. Okay. And so lastly, you talked about the Small Business Administration loan. Now, for some of you out there, you always hear about SBA, but you don't necessarily know some of the details about it. So here we're sitting with someone who has gone through that process, and I'm interested to learn more about being able to secure the loan, what type of collateral was required in order to invest into ViBride.
Yeah, so we also did a SBA loan for ViBride, and one of my business partners, she is the one who is guaranteeing that loan. We are doing an SBA loan for Perspire as well. It is a long, tedious process asking an institutional lender for money, because they want to know everything about you. They basically want your firstborn child. But I mean, I understand it. They want to make sure that, one, you are doing the right things with the money. You're not laundering money. You've got an actual legit business going on. But there are all sorts of SBA loans. There's not just one SBA loan, and I want to make sure everybody understands that. There's not just one cookie cutter type of SBA loan. There's different levels of SBA loans depending on how much you're asking for, how long you may have been in business, what type of business you're providing. So I would recommend, if anyone is going to get an SBA loan, that they make sure that they do their research on the different types of SBA loans. Another thing that's important for people to know is that although it's a government-backed process and a government-backed loan, there are different types of APRs and interest rates. So don't just go to one bank and think that because they're giving you this interest rate that you can't do better. So I would make sure to shop around at different lenders and make sure that you can get the best interest rate for your type of loan that you need.
One of the things that I do have a question about is, so you went through personal investment, family and friends, crowdfunding, and the SBA loan. But what about, did you all consider venture capitalists or angel investors or other types of business incubators, or even grants for minorities or women-owned businesses?
You know, we did. We looked into those. We saw that there were obviously a plethora of them. At the time that we started Vibride, we were kind of under the gun. We wanted to open our studio by New Year's because we wanted the New Year's resolutioners. We were opening a fitness studio, and that is the biggest time for fitness, is January 1. So we were kind of under the gun, and a lot of them we may have passed the deadline or missed the deadline. We may have thought that it was going to take too long. Some of those incubators and pitch processes, we felt as though those were more tech-oriented, which we weren't. We are a fitness industry. We are a service industry. We didn't come up with some app or anything, so we felt as though some of those didn't apply to us. So we did look at them, but we just didn't think at the time that it was useful for us, and that also, if we wanted to, that we could still do it in the future if we needed to.
Okay. And so now tell me a little bit about the funding model for Perspire. And so based on what you learned on Vibride, what did you lift and leverage? What did you, was there anything different that you decided to do?
We also have an SBA loan for Perspire. The only thing different that we've done from Perspire from Vibride was that we actually put in a bigger amount of capital infusion. So our SBA loan is a lot smaller for Perspire, and that has kind of brought up its own interesting, issues. Now that we're going to banks, apparently it's easier to get an SBA loan if you're asking for more money than less money, which is crazy, but it's actually true. So it's been an interesting process doing it for Perspire, asking for a smaller amount of money, but we also have an SBA loan, also have friends and family that are investing.
Talk a little bit about the equity play. How did you guys decide how much equity to give away in your business versus to keep for the owners?
We did it just solely based on capital contribution. So if you have $100 and I put in 50, you put in 50, we're 50-50 partners. If I put in 25, I'm 25% ownership. That's how we've done both Vibride and Perspire, but there's different ways that you can do it. If you know that you may only be putting in $25,000, but you are going to be the sole, sweat equity person. Maybe you get a bigger percentage than 25% because you actually put it in sweat equity. So it really differs, but we just did it based on capital contribution.
Okay. And lastly, I'm just curious, from your perspective, some people will say using other people's money, getting a loan, it's too risky, it makes me nervous. But trying to build up the savings and the personal dollars to make an investment could take a really long time. So what's your perspective on the pros and cons of the funding path that you went down and advice that you would have to other aspiring entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it really is facts and circumstances. I know personally I'm about to get married, I want to have children, I also have a full-time job on top of all of these things. So I needed to keep more of my funds to myself. I've got a wedding to plan, things like that. So it really is facts and circumstances, but it is a big risk if you're asking for a lender to give you a big sum of money. I can tell you personally, my house has a second lien on it because of this investment. I also have a house in Florida that also has a second lien on it, and my grandparents live in that. So if this goes bad, my grandparents are out on the street, which is very, very scary, But it's something that I'm really passionate about, and that even gives me even more reason to make it successful.
I'd like to pivot a little bit and jump into franchising.
Sure.
And so you mentioned that you are franchising the business that you started from the ground up, but then you're also in business with an existing franchisor. So talk about why you decided for your second business, go with an existing franchisor when you've had the experience of starting a business from the ground up.
Well, the reason I decided to franchise a company mainly was because I feel as though I'm becoming a serial entrepreneur, but I just didn't have the time. I didn't have the time to completely start a business from scratch, to come up with branding, to come up with a logo, to come up with a mission, all of the stuff that comes with, birthing a new business.
Right.
And I really enjoyed this business model, the infrared sauna, but I didn't have, like I said, the time to just come up with it on my own. And it was also very helpful to me now as a franchisor of Vibride to be on the other side of the table as a franchisee of Perspire, because now I see how our franchisees feel, and I see kind of the struggles that they're going through. Franchising is an interesting model because, you know, I've got this entrepreneur mindset, but I'm still restricted by the brand. So I can't go out and, you know, market it the way that I want to market, or come up with a new logo, or do social media a different way. I've got to follow the way that the brand is already going. And it's interesting to be in that side of the table and to understand how our franchisees might feel. And it's been very, very integral in making sure that we are great franchisors, and understanding the entire model now that I've been a franchisee as well.
Right. Okay. And when you think about funding for minorities and for women, were there any challenges that you feel like you encountered because you were a minority or a woman trying to obtain funding for a new business?
Funding, I don't think so, not so much. You know, it's really important that you've just got the right numbers. You've got the right credit score, you've got a business plan together, and you understand what the business is. That's really what it comes down to when you're asking investors and asking lenders to give you money. So I don't think that being a minority was that much of a hindrance on that. It has been a hindrance on the actual business and marketing, but not so much on funding. I don't think so.
Okay, and that's really great to hear. The fact that you've gone through this process, and you know, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth. You didn't come from a particularly wealthy family, but you are an intelligent and driven African American woman who was able to figure out your vision and then drive it to fruition. Right. So I really appreciate you sitting down and sharing this evolution of a journey that has so much further to go, and being able to watch it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And keep watching Footprints to Fruition, Finding the Funding. We will bring more information to you on how you can make your vision come true too.